Okay, hello, and first of all, I have to say that I suck at video editing, and this is more like some kind of podcast where I just wrote a script and some notes about what I think of Elden Ring, and I just wanted to talk about it. So if you expect a video with like lots of video material, then this video is not for you, sadly. If I tried to record my own footage of Elden Ring, I'm pretty sure my PC would have exploded and killed me and my neighbors, so I tried to avoid that. So, and also I'm pretty lazy, so with that out of the way, I guess I'm just gonna start because I don't want to make the video like too long or anything, and I don't want to fill it with too much filler and too much talking about things that are not really necessary. So first off, the open world. Obviously, the biggest change to earlier Souls games is the open world. Let's talk about what kind of open world this game has. It's obviously an open world, but you're still kind of gated at specific points. Some areas are not really reachable till late in the game, and even if you reach them early on, they will give you a really hard time that makes you think, yeah, I'm gonna come back here later. Which can be fun, but also a bit frustrating for people who don't know what they're in for. Take your time to explore, and if you find one area that's too hard for you, just find an area that's easier for you. Eventually, you will beat some optional bosses here and there and get up to take on the harder areas. Forgive me, but I will probably compare it a lot to Breath of the Wild sometimes, despite both games having a different approach towards their open worlds. In Elden Ring, the combat is the main reason to play it, at least for me, and in Breath of the Wild, it would be more about the puzzles for me. You can find lots of caves and catacombs and ruins around the world, but they will always be the same pretty much, just with a different reward at the end, and most of the time, the reward will be something useless to you. You can take anything you find with you, because unlike Breath of the Wild, you won't have limited slots, but it's not gonna be something you can just easily use if you decide you want to use it. In my first few hours of the game, I didn't find a single weapon that had like fitting requirements, despite me wanting to use the weapon. Sometimes the requirements were just way too high, or they were in stats like faith or intelligence, despite being a katana or scythe, where I would have to farm tons to raise those levels just for a single weapon, which is just not worth it. So I just continued to trying to find different new weapons for me, which made me a little bit sad, like I enjoy being a katana dude, enjoy putting my points into dexterity, and if I find a katana that looks nice but I can't use it because it needs faith, there's like no way for me to really enjoy the reward I got for getting through one of those catacombs or caves, and that made me sometimes a little bit sad that I couldn't really handle this weapon, even if I really wanted to. But for one weapon, it doesn't make sense. For example, in Breath of the Wild, you won't have this problem since you can use everything you find. It does not matter if it's not a weapon you don't want to use at the moment, but the choice is yours. In Elden Ring, that's not how it works. Eventually, each time I found one of these mini dungeons, I didn't want to enter them because they had no sense of discovery left for me. All of it looked the same to me. The catacombs put a new trap here and there, the fire trap, and sometimes there were like people who throw poison darts at you. But even then, they mostly stayed the same. You always had to get to the end of it, press the lever, and suddenly the door would open. Now you could say the same for Breath of the Wild. The shrines all look the same from the inside, and finding a fighting shrine wasn't fun. But despite that, I love finding a new puzzle one because it was always a new puzzle in there. Here, there's no puzzles, and that's where it really, differs itself from Breath of the Wild. In the end of them, in Breath of the Wild, I always knew I will get something I can use for my character. And this was only true for a few of the mini dungeons I have found in Elden Ring, because some of them gave me a weapon I could actually use. Some of them actually gave me upgrade materials and things that I really needed for my character, but most of the time I got out there empty handed and just thought, yeah, I did all of this for nothing. A few souls here and there or runes, but you know, it felt like a waste of time going through rehash environments for me. Riding the horse works pretty well, and there's not really much to complain about it, except maybe that you can't really customize it for me. Like I thought it would have been maybe nice to put some new armor on it, but it's basically also just used as a method to get from one point to the next way faster, and also does not really add anything to the fight. Most of them, it's okay against some of the bosses, like Tree Sentinel. Obviously, most people beat it without it. Like it's not needed, but it makes it easier for also fights like the dragons when they fly away, and you just have to, if you just keep on running towards them, it will drain your stamina. So it's better to hold the horse and then run over towards the dragon, get off the horse, and every time they do that, you can go back to the horse. And aside from that, it doesn't really add anything. It was basically added to combat having an open world. It doesn't really add anything except, you know, balancing the issues that you would have without a horse, because you would have to walk from point A to point B, which is like super duper away. And with a horse, you don't have the problem. Like, you are pretty fast on a horse. And another thing that I really hated about the overworld, there are no real puzzles in the world, or nothing that I would call a puzzle, honestly, because everyone with two working brain cells will be able to find out everything about those puzzles really quickly. Like, once I went through a forest and saw a chest, and there was a little imp statue with a book that gave me a message to tell me to touch all three chests. Sadly, not big titty chests, but that's fine too. Then something might happen, and it also gives you a map, despite the area being pretty small. For the second chest, you didn't even need the map, because you can literally see it right from the point you get the map. So you can walk over there, like 5 meters to the left, and already you got two chests out of the three you need. Now the third one is maybe a little bit more tricky, because if you didn't have the map, then it would have been tricky, because it's hidden inside of a rock that you can destroy with magic or some little explosive bombs, or I'm pretty sure I saw it on the stream, you can also just hit it and it's like an elusive wall, but I used like an explosive bomb to open the rock, and it even shines through the rock, so there should be like no trouble for anything, to think, oh, this is like too hard for me to figure out. I have the map, I have the shining through the rock, and it's also right there on the map. So you look at the map and this is the right spot. This has to be it. So, you get back to where you found the first chest, or where, you found the image statue with the message that told you what to do. And then you go back and boom, there's a tower suddenly with some loot that you may be able to use or not, because when I walked into there, I didn't got anything I needed, because there was a magic spell, I'm pretty sure, in there, and I didn't use magic. For people who use magic, nice. And that's kind of what the most puzzles in the overworld are there for. You will have to find three chests, you will have to find three turtles, you have to find three this or that, and in the end, you will always go into the same tower that suddenly appears, suddenly opens up to get a reward, and you may be able to use the reward, or you may not be able to use it. And no puzzle in this game actually makes you use your brain. There's no obscure puzzle to be found anywhere. Another example would be the Ziofra River. Here you fight the boss of the area, or to fight the boss of the area, you have to light 6 torches. All you have to do is to just find them and light them. Obviously, this kind of counts as a puzzle, but also kind of not. Like, it's not really making you think. It's just like, oh, activate torches. I can do that. As a reward, you get to fight against an annoying boss. It has a nice area and everything, but it's not one of my favorite bosses. But the thing is, they reuse this puzzle twice. Not in a different area or anything like that. They literally reuse the same puzzle in the same area. Once on the bottom part of it, and once on the upper part of it. And as a reward for it, you have to fight the same boss again. At that point, I was just like, was this really needed? Why couldn't we have made it so that first you light the torches in the lower area, and then you have to later on also light them in the upper area? Obviously, the upper area is kind of harder to find than the lower area, but it would have been, for me, it would have been more mysteriously fun to not have to do it twice, to fight the same boss twice, but just to also awaken some kind of mystery feeling inside of you, like a feeling that makes you think, oh, I wonder what happens if I light these torches and nothing happens. It's like, oh, why does nothing happen? And then later on, you find the other part and you light these torches too, and now you can go fight the boss and maybe make the boss harder, because the boss wasn't really hard, and when you fight it twice, it's like, I don't know. It's just not fun. It's like rehashed, but I will come to that later. I would say that the NPC quests in this game are at least fairly mysterious, but I wouldn't really count those as puzzles, and they also get easily bugged. One thing I don't like about the NPCs sometimes, or the quests, is that sometimes the NPC doesn't tell you where to go. Like, it's an open world game, and sometimes the NPCs just disappear and appear in the open world in different areas, and it's like, you would have to go through all the areas again, even if you already explored them, just to be able to find this one NPC again. Sometimes they tell you, some quest lines even give you quest markers on the map that people hate normally, but here they do it. Like in the Volcano Manor quest, they tell you, hey, this is where you have to go. It could have been nice if it just told us, oh, I won't here, but obviously that's going to be really fucking hard to find like the invader thing on the ground. So obviously they gave you more than just a little pointer into what direction you should go. But sometimes they don't tell you any direction, and they're basically like, good luck finding this NPC. If you find him, nice. If you don't find him, well, that's not what I have to think about. And, the thing is, I also do not see how people see this world as something amazing aside from the world building and design. It's pretty, and the location all look distinct and have pretty views, but to me it still feels like a generic world that has nothing truly hidden in its deepest corners. Every time I went off the normal path, all I found were the same enemy camps, the same ruins, the same catacombs, and other times I just found nothing at all. Also the open world makes it way less replayable for me. One thing I loved about the other Souls games is how big they felt despite being not as big as you might think. Your first playthrough will take you like 20 hours or more, but when you play it again it's way shorter and you can appreciate how tight the design of these games are. It's not just because you know how to play the game now, but also know of its shortcuts and how the world is designed. And I think a second playthrough really makes you appreciate those things more. There's almost no fat on the bones that isn't needed, like there's no stretching from how do we stretch our game time a little bit more. In Elden Ring, I love the design of the legacy dungeons for the most part. What I do not like is that they mostly castles and it's kind of like, oh, another castle, another castle, another castle. But the design of the overall open world just makes me go on my horse from dungeon to dungeon, and it's just a waste of time. Like there's no, in the outer ones, I could just continue through my linear path where I never felt this is a waste of time because it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a long time to go from point A to point B, while here point A is way farther away because you have to go through this open world now instead of just going, through a tunnel. Another thing I disliked a lot about Elden Ring was how many enemies there are in groups. The worst example of that is for sure the Harlech tree section. It's like an optional area, so you don't have to go through it, but the game just shits enemies right into your face. And not just weak ones either. It's literally a mini boss galore boss rush thing at every corner covered with like 3 or even more normal enemies. It's like absolute terror and just made me run through most of it, even though the area was like really pretty. The absolute low point was like the section where it spawns the first boss of the game as a normal mob, which wasn't unusual at that point anymore, and you have seen that thing at least like a couple of times. But here it spawns, and you think, okay, I will own you. Then you continue your path, and one of those things spawns again, right in front of you, and you think, yeah, okay, I will own you too, okay? Then you continue your path, and another one spawns, and at this point, anyone who isn't like a total blinded fanboy will think, hello? Okay, but it continues like with 2 more if you follow the path to the end. Like 5 times in a row, it spawns the same mini boss enemy in the same path. Like it's not like a totally different area where it spawns. It's like in the same path, and you find a room in the same area with 3 crystal mini bosses that you have found endlessly before that point too already. And this doesn't even make the game hard or anything. It just makes your game worse, Nobody with more than like 5 brain cells would enjoy this. I can bet you 90% of the people playing this game will just run into that room, grab the items, and bolt out of there without fighting those enemies. Or the other enemies too. Like those enemies don't even fit through normal doors, so you just have to run this path, and boom, you're out of there. Like the enemy spam in this game is just insane at certain points, and I never want to see a person again complain about the mobs in Dark Souls 2 because otherwise you're dissing your own new favorite game, because Elden Ring is like the absolute worst with how it spams the enemies into your freaking face. Okay, bosses. Most people would say the meat and soul of Dark Souls. Get it? Like the meat and soul, like Dark Souls, haha. Of these games are the bosses, so let's talk about those. I know this is going to be a rather subjective point, but I really miss boss themes that gave bosses a unique identity. Something that makes you remember them because their theme is just that memorable, like Tower Knight or Maiden Astria. Not the so generic choir, epic orchestra soundtrack of the later Souls games. Yes, they do feel epic when you're fighting the boss, but if you change all the tracks in the game around, nothing would really feel different. Try doing that with the boss themes of Demon Souls, and it's not gonna work since they all have like a unique fitting theme and feel to the bosses. But this is like a problem I have like with most of the newer Souls games, and it's not just the problem of Elden Ring. Obviously, there's a few nice themes I still like and fit the bosses, like the ghost horse you won in Elden Ring, that you fight against after you solve the 2 samey puzzles. But my biggest problem with the Elden Ring bosses is the following. There are like so many rehashed bosses all over the world that it actually made me a little bit sad. Going through a nice fort in these snowy mountaintops just to get greeted by another reskinned Commander O'Neill. Why does he even have like this really American name? Like it sounds like an American war crime dude that committed tons of them in the Middle East. Like, okay, I won't complain about his name, but you already fought a version of him basically in Khalid and with a different name and a little bit of a different moveset. And it just feels kind of sad. There's like some changes to the moveset here and there, but most bosses stay the same basically. Finding the Erdtree avatars so often just to suddenly fight one who can double himself, so now you can fight him even more often. Hey, wait, let me also make him spawn in the capital city. Wouldn't that be funny? So we can fight him more whenever we want to because he's such a fun fight, because that's an enemy that will always respawn at that point. Turning bosses into normal enemies is like nothing new for the series, but here in Elden Ring they can even do it the reverse way. On the way to the capital, you find and fight a giant gargoyle who you will do barely any damage to, even if you got to a fairly high level. If you're smart, you will just run away like I did because he's just a normal enemy, not a boss. No boss theme, no big health bar at the bottom of the screen that appears, just a normal one that you will barely be able to put a dent into. When you get farther into the game, you will meet a second one in the capital city, this time inside of the city. Same scenario and everything. Now you get even farther into the game, and you will meet this kind of gargoyle for the third time, but this time it's not an optional one, and he has like one or two new moves. And he's a boss now, which also just felt lame to me. This guy is supposed to like guard the entry to a new area, and this is the best that he could have picked for the job. Like, okay. The fight itself is also just really underwhelming because you already know most of the attacks you can do. If you tried fighting them before later on, I also found him again as a boss in a different area and just thought, okay, well, cool, I guess. And I'm pretty sure the one I found is one that most people will find before they fight the other one, which just makes it even worse, to be honest. And they have insanely lots and lots of HP. And they are not very fun to fight. Also, the game in general just does an insane disservice to its bosses with the amount of reuse. I don't mind it sometimes. In Outer Souls game, it never even bothered me. I thought it was actually cool because the Taurus demon or Cabo demon will give you some trouble if you fight them for the first time, and then later on you just kill them as if they were never hard actually, because you're more powerful and better at the game. But you don't get this feeling here. Bosses will still be beefed up and juiced up, so it will still take time to beat them, and the more I saw the bosses, the more I just felt like dropping the game. Every time I went through a fog door and saw the same enemy, I felt I was getting pranked. Remember when going through a fog door meant excitement because you wanted to see what kind of cool shit From came up with? That feeling was completely gone for me towards the end of this game. Each time I saw one, I just wondered which boss am I gonna fight again, unless it's a big story boss. But even there, they reused a couple of them. Sometimes, less is more. Not every part of an area needs a boss. You don't have to put him everywhere. You don't have to put a boss everywhere. You can just have an area without a boss. You don't need this stupid skeleton cruising around on his boat, being in this place, being in that place, this place, here, there. Sometimes it would have been more fun to see an area with like a nice building, anything but the same boss again. Okay, and now I'm gonna go on a bit of a rant about most of the bigger bosses here and will leave out most of the rehash bosses out unless they were actually good bosses. Very unlikely, or they were so bad that they actually deserve a mention. Okay, let's start with Margit, the first big boss that most people will probably fight against, and to be honest, for a beginner's boss, he goes hard. But eventually you see through his pattern and it doesn't look so hopeless anymore. Feels like people are blowing him out of proportion sometimes, especially since most people just make a beeline straight towards him instead of exploring a bit first and getting geared. This is kind of like the fault of the game because it's like, hey, follow these things on the map and, he is really early for such a boss. But he's also like one of the best examples why it is like most bosses in this game. They just go sicko mode on you. It feels like the designers thought every fight in this game needs to be bigger, faster, more unfun, more aggressive, more of everything. In all the Souls games, the fight always escalated towards the end, but here they are like this almost right from the start. Some of the early bosses would be late game bosses in other Souls games. Even the easier ones have insane combos sometimes, and to combat this problem, they went ham on your stamina bar in this game. Right off the start, it feels like you can roll around and swing way more often than you ever could at the end of other Souls games, because they knew even the early bosses require you to have an insane amount of stamina just to be able to dodge. If they didn't give you so much, you could literally never hit them because you wasted it all on dodging. Another option they give you in this game are Ashen Summons, and some of them are just straight up broken. Blah blah blah, don't use them if you think they're broken, blah blah blah. But I believe some of the bosses were literally made with the idea of having to use those summons for bosses. Especially some of the dual battles. Putting two fast aggressive enemies into the same room just screams bad design to me. Onsen and Smug worked because one dude was slow and the other one was fast. That battle like felt only unfair maybe for the first few times, till it started to click with you and you realize, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. No, those battles just felt like poop because you either have to play almost perfectly, wait for one of the bosses to bug out, because sometimes I saw like sometimes one of the bosses would just walkly or slowly walk towards me while the other one tries to do his moveset. So it's like, oh, maybe he doesn't want to attack me anymore, but eventually they will do it, but it's like it kind of feels like it's bugging out, or the AI is like kind of like, hey, I'm taking pity out on you. Or you can use these summons, which don't make it very satisfying. But the thing is, you can play the game how you want to play it. I would never judge someone for using these summons to its full potential in this game, because I did it too at certain points. Let's continue with Radan. What the fuck did they think when they made this fight? Cool location. Check. Multiple summons that make you think, wow, that's kinda cool. Check. Cool design till you notice this big ass thick man is sitting on a tiny horse, or I think I've seen people call it a yak, which makes more sense with its long neck, but which makes it look as the yak or horse made him look dumb as heck. Check. Making him one of the most unfun bosses in the whole series. Check. They successfully made this boss look like a spectacle for the first time you meet him before you become frustrated because of how unfun he actually is. I can't even really put it into words why it's such an unfun fight. He's like that, not even that hard to be honest, but something about his moves, it just annoys me. It is everything that I hate in modern Souls games. He's like the definition of, we need to make him go wild. We need to give him some cool looking moves that are not fun to play against, but we still somehow need to top it off. How about multiple summons that will randomly decide how much they will do before they just killed in one big swoop? Sometimes the fight felt like a lottery because of those NPCs. Sometimes they did nothing. Sometimes they did a shit ton of damage before they, while other times they just died without doing anything. Like, I don't even, like, Radan just kind of broke me at certain points. When I beat him, I just was like, yeah, I beat him. Cool. I wasn't even happy. I was just like, oh, thank God this is freaking over now. The fire giant. Try to try to defend this fight. You literally can't. Nothing about this fun. Nothing about this fight is fun. And I sure do love hitting the boss's feet till he gets into phase 2 and rolls even more one like an idiot with one-shot attacks. That was really fun when he just rolls around. It's easy to avoid the wall, but when he once got you in one attack that one-shots you, after you get him into the second phase and he has like lots of HP, and it's just not fun. And again, hit the feet, woohoo, having fun. People hated that shit in Dark Souls 2, already with like the Giant Lord, but there's tons of them. Like, not even just the fire giant. In general, there's like so many huge enemies in this game where you just hit the feet all over till they stagger and you can hit their weak spot for massive damage. It kind of makes you feel some of the people on the team had a foot fetish where they just make you hit feet all the time, so you are really focused on the feet. And I really hate that every Souls games needs to have like these super huge enemies that just make you hit their feet. It's not cool, it's not fun, it's not anything. Okay, Astel. Natural Born of the Void, I think is the second part of his name, but I just wrote down Astel. I liked his design. Kind of annoying fight, but he was acceptable. Kind of didn't like that his fight just takes like place in a rehashed cave, like it was like the same cave with like the horse that jumps around. But his cave kind of looked a little bit cooler when he did his attacks with like the stars in the sky and shit like that. But the one thing that made me sad is that even he wasn't safe from getting rehashed, because you can find him into another area. I fought him as part of the Rani quest line, and I thought he is at least a unique enemy, but I saw a streamer and he fought him in like a totally different location, and it was like, poor Astel, not even he was safe Because, look at his design. He doesn't deserve to be rehashed. There's some enemies where I can accept that they getting rehashed because their designs are nothing to write home about. But this guy had like one of the best designs in the whole game, and it's just sad. Now, the Godskin do. I have no words for that one. I do not want to use the word laziness when it's not about myself because I'm lazy. I don't want to call other people lazy, but why this fight? This fight just makes zero sense. I can understand putting two of the I can understand putting two of the most annoying bosses together to annoy the player because both of them have endlessly long combos attacks, so they become even more annoying when you put them together. But why do they need to have a shared health bar? Why not have one for each? Why can't the fight just end when you kill both of them at close to each other, like the two princes fight, where you have to kill them both together at the same time to count it as a true kill. Why do we need to grind one big health bar down and they can respawn endlessly until it's done? Who thought this boss was actually even needed? Like, it's basically just there to stretch the fight more. This fight will like stay in people's head for one single reason, being actual bullshit. Ornstein and Smug, again, were bullshit for many people till they finally beat them and actually came to the conclusion how epic and awesome the fight was, because you just feel great beating those two. No one will ever think the same feeling about these two pieces of shit. Especially since they're just rehashed bosses too. It's like frankly embarrassing for me to even put them into the same sentence with Ornstein and Smug, to be honest. Or Smug, whatever the heck. It just feels it's doing a disservice to them because they feel like a fight where they put effort and thought into it, while the Scott Gin do is just like, yeah, we need more time. We need the players to play even more of our game, so put in these two annoying freaking freaks into the game together into one room. Okay, Godfrey. For the love of God, why did we have to fight the golden version of him before? Just like with the other bosses, it took away some of the mystery. Like, if you didn't have to fight him before, I would have been like, wow, damn, he was the first Elden Lord, that's sick, bro. Can't wait to see what he can do. But since we already have seen him, it just got the reaction of like, oh, it's him again, I guess, out of me. And it is just sad for a boss so close to the end. That doesn't even include the version, the over goal you can find, because I didn't fight that one, but I saw it in streams later on too. And it doesn't help that his first phase is basically just that whole fight again with a bit more oomph to it. The second phase must also be one of the biggest disappointments I have. What was Miyazaki senpai even thinking? You got a cool ass tiger right there, but instead of somehow incorporating him into the fight, this giant meathead just kills him to prove what? He can kill a huge tiger with a sense? Wow, cool. We have killed way bigger things already, so why would that impress me? We have also seen this kind of cutscene a couple of times by now. Be it first phase cutscene where boss cuts a part of himself off to replace it with something else, or something like that, and then boom, second phase begins. More like Godfrey, who is like, wow, I have a dragon now. Maybe this was also like meant to be bait, to make people think the tiger will infuse with him or something silly as that. But instead, he just takes his claws off and just fights us with his fists and feet, and it's like one of the lamest and easiest fights of all time. It's even easier than the first phase for me. Like, were they afraid of making us suffer through a duel fight again after the god awful Godskin fight? Too afraid to have a rather animalistic boss again, since shortly before that we've already fought a beast dude already? Couldn't they turn the tiger into a fun fight if they added to it? Like, did they try to do it? I don't know. Maybe not. And, despite there being so many more unfun bosses to fight, I wouldn't have minded this guy turning into bullshit because he is like the first Elden Lord. You want this guy to show you, wowie, he can do it. But we will never know, and this was one of the most disappointing fights for me that lead up to a final boss. And it just made me feel wow. Like, obviously there's people who say like lore reasons, like wow, he didn't want to fight you as his Elden Lord kind of version. He wanted to find you as his warrior instincts, like, oh, I can do this alone. I don't need my tiger. I don't need a weapon. I don't need anything. I can just punch you to death. And I can see how that's epic to some people. For me, it just kind of felt lame. Also, I saw he can do an attack where he can punch you straight into the air and then suplex the fuck out of you. Maybe I would have had such a bad opinion of him if he did an attack on me during the fight, which he sadly didn't. Really wish he did it because that shit looks cool, and it maybe would have made me like him if he would have suplexed me like that. but instead of that, he just turns into one of the lamest humanoid fights in the whole series for me. I know this is maybe like one of my biggest hot takes in this whole video so far, that I am disappointed by that dude. And now we have Sir Gideon Govnir, the All-Knowing. I wonder if he knew he would just turn into a boss that's more like a generic NPC invader, but as a boss. Because, he probably didn't knew it, because he also told me I won't be able to defeat a god. And I did it anyways. So I don't think he's really that all-knowing. So, and this fight was kind of like, whatever. Like, I already like forgot his name, and I was wondering who the heck this guy even was when I looked up the list of bosses to go through for this video. And I was like, which bosses can I pick? Which were some of the more unique ones? Who the fuck was Sir Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing? That sounds kind of like, did I fight this guy even? And then I realized, oh, it's the guy at the roundhouse table kicker, whatever the frick. And it just made me think, okay, his fight was just, yeah, he's just more like an invader. Morg, Lord of Blood, and Oh Lord, even one of the bosses that should have been unique has been rehashed. I first fought Morg, Lord of the Omen, in the sewers before that, and later got to the True Lord of Blood, and then I noticed literally, oh, he has the same attacks as this dude I fought in the basement. And it made me think like, well, really, why? I mean, probably lore reasons like, oh, he was the one with the flamed frenzy flame, the endings, they all tie together. Like, I must say, I'm not the biggest lore dude in the world. That's just not why I play Souls games for. I am not saying anything negative about the lore. I have no idea about the true lore of the game, and I'm sure there's tons of YouTubers who will make it sound very nice and really fun, and I'm looking forward to how people cobble everything together. But since I am not the all-knowing dude that knows about the lore, I'm not even saying anything about it. But even for a lore reason, to have the same unique boss, or the same boss that should be unique. Obviously, Lord of Blood has more attacks than the Lord of Omen in the basement, but yeah. Okay, awesome. Here's something positive. Sharpened God. I have to say, this is the coolest gimmick boss with a wind sword in any Souls game so far. He was kind of easy, but he has an amazing boss design, really cool environment, especially in the second phase when he does like his big dig attack, and it looks like literally you're fighting in hell. And his whole mansion was like one of the best parts of the game for me. I really wish the mansion would have been a little bit more bigger. Like the mansion itself would have been more explorable, because the second part of the mansion that was like a little bit destroyed was a little bit more. I really liked like the mysterium this area gave you, and I kind of hate myself for killing him before I finished the last um, side quest kill in the mountaintops thing, because I was pretty stupid to kill him before I like. What did I even expect? I killed him. I was like, oh, why won't you let me do your quest? It's like, bro, I killed her leader. And when you return to the boss area, you fought the guy, you can see and find her again, and you can get like a special fight against her bodyguard if you attack her in that area again. So if you haven't done that yet, you should maybe do that. Now let's move on to the next bosses. Tons of dragons, and after 5 Souls games, there's still not a very satisfying dragon fight in the series. Especially here, since every single dragon is literally the same. They are boring, easy to fight, but some of the most massive HP tanks, so it will take a while to beat them. Even the optional big boss Dragon Lord Platzi Deus Ex, more like you have a flaccid dick, is just kind of whatever. Cool boss area at least. Beast Clear Man, kind of whatever fight till the second phase, and it's one of the best bosses in the game for me. Malikev, for me, is like the highlight boss of the game. He does not feel bullshit at all, despite like jumping here, jumping there, bam bam bam. He has beautiful animation, and he has the perfect difficulty for me. He goes crazy hard with his combos sometimes, but they feel fair. The timings of you being able to punish him feel fair, and the whole fight was just fun. It was like a dance kinda. That the only attack that I kinda hated was when he throws like his sword thing, bloody things at you after he does the jump, but eventually you will find out, okay, he's doing that now, and then it becomes pretty easy. And I really love the fight, and I really wish there would be a boss rush mode. Maybe one day they will add it to the game like Sekiro. I really wish they would bring back the bonfire aesthetics from Dark Souls 2, but maybe they won't. Malenia, yeah, fuck this boss. I'm not ashamed to say I just gave up and used the Mimic tier to fuck her over hardcore. No more words needed, basically. With respect to everyone who can cheese her without the summon, but I just had no more patience. Even if I would have beaten him normally, I would have just not been happy about it. Probably, I would have just been like, you know, yeah. No, Radagon of the First Order or the Golden Order. He's kind of okay, I guess. A bit easy, which makes sense since you gotta fight him again if you die to the boss after, but nonetheless, kind of fun. Cool design, cool arena design. His boss team actually makes you feel this is it, and then it leads to the Elden Beast. Hauntingly beautiful theme, stunning visual design on both the boss and the arena, and it may just even make you die just being stunned by the beauty of it. And, the fight itself, nothing to really write home about, but it will stay in your head just for the design of it alone. Like like most Dark Souls bosses, except fucking the Chandra from Dark Souls 2 that makes you think, yeah, that is one of the maybe not one of the worst final. I mean, that's not about Dark Souls 2. Never mind. And maybe the bullshit ability where it shoots so much golden shit at you that you can't see anything is a little bit annoying. It kind of makes you go blind. And I think these are like most of the major bosses. Obviously there's like Morgoth, which is like better, a bigger, better version of Margit. But there's the Crucible Knight, and then there's Crucible Knight with this paired dude. Then there's no again the Crucible Knight in the overworld. This Crucible dude, the Burial Air Tree Watchdog 5 times. This 5 times. That 5 times. It's like I don't I don't even want to talk about those. I'm just disappointed how the game truly lacks unique bosses. It never gave me the feel like the more I played the game, the more I was like, can it be over? Do I really have to fight the same bosses again? Do I really have to go through the same amount of enemies again? Do I really have to go through this section again? The Fallen Aurum, whatever the frick, Aurum Vale, that's Final Fantasy 14, never mind. Like the last area of the game with the tornadoes flying around. It wasn't a fun area to explore because tons of enemies, tons of strong enemies, tons of this, tons of that, unfun fights. I just wanted it to be over with. I mean, you can probably guess what I'm really disappointed about in this game. And, you know, I really hope the success of the sales and reviews won't really mean that From will go never go back to the linear experiences. I'm pretty sure we will get a linear Souls kinds of game again. But I do think at this point I'm kind of tired of them too. So I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't mind a Sekiro 2. I wouldn't mind if they do something completely different, like or they can go back to Armored Core. But obviously, From Software maybe will never stop making these kind of games again because look at the sales, look at how people love them. And I do really wish they would go to a more unique style again. Like after, like I don't want to call it Dark Souls 4 on horse and open world, but it is kind of like that. I really wish the game would do something really unique to set it apart from the other ones, like something I don't know. I don't know how they could make this more unique. To me, it just feels like bigger, better, worse in certain places. We need to go harder with the bosses. We need to go harder with this. We need to make everything harder. We need to make everything faster. We make everything more aggressive. And I really wish there would be a little bit more of a slower experience again. Dark Souls 1 still feels amazing. And it's like way less hectic, and hastily with its design where every boss needs to be able to do this and that and this and it can I really wish I would go back. This already started with a little bit of Dark Souls 3, and obviously it's also the influence of Bloodborne, but Bloodborne is a little bit different. Like obviously it's still a Souls-like game, but it's like different than the Souls games with the variety and amount of builds you can go. So I really wish we can get a slower Dark Souls experience one day again. But at this point, I'm just also kind of burnt out. And, it didn't totally disappoint me. Like, it was fun. But the amount of rehashed open world stuff to do, the amount of rehashed bosses, so many enemies, it just made me think, yeah, the world building, amazing. The scenery, beautiful, pretty. That is like one of the biggest things why I wanted to explore, to see more of the environment, but it never made me really think the open world is truly needed. I can get these views without the open world. I can go fire up Dark Souls 1. I can look at Ash Lake and think, wow, this is just as beautiful as it always was without an open world to see. You know, it didn't really add anything of value to me. It just made the whole experience a little bit more muddled and puddled down. And yeah, that's kind of my thoughts about Elden Ring. So I hope, you know, it's kind of understandable complaints and I'm just not rambling about random things that make me sound like, oh, you hate this game, you don't understand what the game is about. But yeah, you know, if you really listen to all of this, I thank you. And thanks for watching, or more like thanks for listening, because all I'm doing is literally talk, and I really need to drink something now because I didn't drink anything because I'm so lazy. I just did a one take without pressing the pause button because I can just upload this immediately instead of having to part or piece parts together. But at this point, I'm just babbling, blah blah blah. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for enjoying it. Maybe if you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, I hope you can still enjoy the game because you're probably gonna enjoy it if you don't agree with my points. So, thanks.